Did you hear that?
Ooh, wow. That's fancy.
Okay.
Consent. It's the real deal. Zoom's not playing around anymore.
No, they're not.
No, I noticed that as well because it just started like this week.
Yes, just this
Oh,
week.
wow.
Yeah, because I record every single one of my meetings. So I was like, I understand why they have it, but I don't like when it says it because then I feel like it probably puts people on edge.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a little intimidating at first. All right, Trey.
Do this thing. Let's do this thing. I'm super excited to hear a little bit about your journey and the craziness that has ensued, perhaps over the past few years, as you've taken on this adventure and this challenge. Part of what we do with our communities and our virtual groups is we try and encourage people to take adventures, right? Whether they're small or big, and to try new things and to get out of your comfort zone and to meet new people, really. And so one of the big underlying themes of what we're really trying to do is simply help connect people, including ourselves. We started these programs to connect with other people, especially during the pandemic. So you are the connection guru, and we're super stoked to have you here to find out all the wisdom there is to know about human beings. So for the next 12 hours, we're going to just sit here and listen to you.
I have it all prepared.
Perfect. But Eileen, you guys have connected, so why don't you tell us how that happened, and we'll get into the story here.
Yes. So Rob, what was I, 29? Oh shoot,
I had it up to 2902, I think.
2902. And I heard about your project. So for everybody, this is Rob Lawless. He has this project to meet 10,000 people. You started in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard about your project through a mutual friend and was living in New York for the month and wanted to do unique things and connect with people and connect with myself and connect with places in New York that I had not connected with when I lived there. So I thought, perfect. Emailed you, let's meet. I think you were meeting people at WeWork. And I said, well, no, let's do something fun and let's walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, which we did. Which was great and resulted in some great pictures, which ended up on the local news.
That's right.
Which was fun. But I know you were working in sales and consulting, and I don't know. Would you have quit your job if I know you were laid off from consulting. Do you think you would have quit? Because I know you started the project before.
So I quit consulting and went into sales, and then that was the one that I was laid off of.
Right.
I don't know. I honestly don't think I would have quit. I think, or it would have been a while before I did, because I don't know if I would have left that security. But I do have G chats with my older brother from, well, for backstory, like I was working for this tech startup, the sales role, and the company had like 120 people. It had like 80 when I started. We grew very quickly. And then in February of 2016, they laid off 20% of the company, and my team went from 19 people back to 5, which is what it was at when I joined.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like we're going in the right direction. And I remember talking to my brother being like, I might have to go full time. Like if I meet 50 people by the time June rolls around, I think I might quit and do my project full time. And he said, no, that's a bad idea. He's like, you need to have money to support yourself. And then June rolled around, I had met over 100 people, and the company was bought out and I was laid off. I think it was like June 27th. So later this month will be 5 years since I've been doing strictly Robs10kfriends full time.
It's amazing. And to bringing it into perspective, you made a decision that you wanted to spend an hour with 10,000 people, just simply connecting and meeting. When did that idea hit you, if you can remember? Was there a moment when you're like, I got this idea?
I have, in January of 2014, I have an iPhone note that is my first documentation of it. And so that may be the same exact day that I came up with the idea, but it is me deciding that I was going to meet 10,000 people one-on-one for 10 minutes each in 1 year. And I had the math drawn out, which I was like, okay, 10 minutes a day, if you factor that into an 8-hour workday, that's like 40 people a day, whatever. The math was all off because it didn't take into account ever eating or going to the bathroom or traveling in between seeing people. So it was a bad idea. And I think at that time I saw it as this cool thing that I could do that would be like a thing on my resume or something like that, because I would do it in a year. And then as I matured a little bit, I wanted to flip that concept on its head and be like, I'm going to do something that's going to take a long time, but has a lot of meaning. And it was really when I was doing sales, I had 30-minute sales calls with people. So in that time, you talk about the weather, you talk about your product, boom, you're done, you're off the phone. And I thought, I want to do something that's going to lead to a deeper connection with people. Like, it's still surface level-ish because it's an hour, but you can really dive into people's lives in an hour. So it switched from 10 minutes with each person to an hour with each person. And at that time, if you look at my early emails, I told people I was going to try to do it in aggressively about 4 years. And I learned more and more about the project the more I did it. So
as things go from time to time.
And you meet 4 people a day, Monday through Friday?
Up until about a couple of weeks ago. So I have this cough, which has just been with me for like the last 3 weeks. I think it's from allergies, but I was in LA for a month from April to May, went back to Hoboken, New Jersey, and was there for my brother. He lives in New York City. So I stayed for a couple of weeks up there for his birthday. Allergies got really bad. Completely lost my voice. So I had to cancel most of my meetings a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time in my life that I'd lost my voice so badly that I actually couldn't talk. Because I've been hoarse before, where I could just have a conversation. I would be like a little bit muted, but I couldn't. It was so scratchy, and I couldn't actually get the words out. So I did 1 meeting a day, and even that was difficult. But as a result of having that extra time, I put out Instagram stories to look for public speaking opportunities, and I had a bunch of people get back to me. So I have always thought, okay, maybe I have to tweak the way that I spend my time a bit and create more TikTok content or create more Instagram reels or reach out for partnerships or reach out for public speaking opportunities. So right now I'm moving it back to 3 people a day so that I can free up my time, because usually it was like 8 to 5 every day was taken up with either meeting people or writing about them. And then I would do all that stuff in the evening, but my energy would be a little bit shot. So now I'm trying to just play with it and see, is it worth it to spend this time more focused on reaching out to brands or universities? And 3 people a day is still a pretty good clip to move at. So that's where we're at right now. But for the last 5 years, 4 people a day, Monday through Friday. And actually, when I first took it full time, I was doing 5 people a day in Philadelphia.
Are you just zapped at the end of a 4 or 5 person day, or are you just such an extrovert that it fuels you up?
4, I think, is the magic number, because I would notice when I was doing 5 people a day that by Wednesday, when I'd met 15 people, I could feel myself kind of like in a car running on fumes. But 4, I am tired at the end of the day, but I'm excited to wake up and do it the next day. So 3 feels a little bit light for me right now. But again, I'm trying to like put that energy into other things. But I think about this path, and as an extrovert, it's very easy for me to meet with people very often because I do get energy from it. So I'm like, I don't even know if an introvert could actually do this just from the energy standpoint, not because they're shy or they don't get along with people, because of the energy.
Nope, can't. And here's one of my questions, Eileen, I have, because both of you guys are extroverts, which I'm extremely envious of. So one of my questions for you was, as you're exploring connection, and from part of your story, I was reading that, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, you're doing all these cold calls and you're in sales and stuff, and there's just no connection there. So you're like, screw that. I'm just going to meet with people without any notes, without any agenda, and just have conversations. And so through all of your experience in that, my question was, if you had to teach an introvert how to connect with people or be better at connection, or any strategies or any things you've learned along the way, what would you say, or how would you guide that? Because I'm an introvert and I need this help.
Well, so I can't speak to how you can get more energy from people, but in terms of people who are shy or maybe socially anxious, and I can only speak from my own experience, which is set a goal for yourself to make human connection a routine part of your life. And for me, setting a goal for myself is the way that I've been able to do that. And I think it sounds weird to be like, oh, this year I'm going to try to meet one new person each month, but it makes it, what do they say, smart, right? Like I forget what it's, specific, measurable, attainable, and then you reflect on it, and then something else, there's a T in there somewhere. But I meeting 10,000 people has given me this excuse to go out and meet with people, and what it's also done is allowed me to do it in a repetitive manner, because I've learned so much on how to have a conversation with people by having conversations with people. So I just got better at it over time because I was doing it so often. And what I found is, in my early meetings, I would think about, what can I ask this person to get to know them, or what can I ask? And now it's much more of a flow when I talk to people. But it's because I already have this mental library built up of topics that I can choose from. So when I'm talking to people, I'm not thinking, oh, what if we run out of things to say? Because I have that confidence that I know I can carry the conversation forward. But that came from the repetition of talking to people who are easy to talk to, and talking to people who are difficult to talk to. And then you're thinking in your mind, okay, where can I take this conversation? And building on top of that, I will say my personal strategy when getting to know people is I think about their lives as a timeline. So if you think, I'm born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the suburbs, grew up here, went to Catholic school in high school, went to Penn State for university, did consulting for Deloitte for a year and 3 months, sales for RJ Metrics for a year and 9 months, Robs10kfriends full-time for 5 years. That takes us up to where I am now, age 30. So even just in saying that, like, you have an idea of what the flow of my life has been. And when I talk to other people, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is what is the flow of their life. And I always start with, where are you from? Or like, so are you from Atlanta originally, or whatever? Because if they say yes, then you get to figure out if they've ever left or not. If they say no, there's a story immediately of how they got to that place. And then it's just filling in the gaps of, okay, we talked about your university experience if you went to school. We talked about your career. We talked about your childhood, but we didn't talk about high school yet. So what were you like in high school? What were your interests then? And it's just filling in the gaps. And then just to further build on that, and then I'll turn it back to you. There's a method of conversation that someone had commented on an article that I had written once, and they said, this reminds me of the Ford method of conversation. And if I could pass on anything, which I plan to do this to universities and corporations and stuff, it's this, because it's so simple. It stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And that, if you want to get to know someone, you just ask questions within those categories. And if you want to be really good at talking to someone, know the answers to those questions about yourself, so that you can explain your own story in a clear and concise manner. And that has been huge for me, because I talk to people from India, Germany, Pakistan, all over the world now, and everyone's life has a family dynamic, an occupation, which is their education, their job, recreation, which is the hobbies that they enjoy, and dreams, which is where they want to go for their lives. And any person that you talk to in life will have those categories. So it's just getting good at asking those questions.
That's a pretty good tool, actually. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Rob, because I've seen this. It's almost like you're compartmentalizing, because you've got all these questions, you've got this, you're building this narrative, you're not taking any notes. I don't know if you've changed that, with going online, you're not taking notes, but you're so engaged. How are you so present in communication?
I think it goes back to the timeline thing. and building out a person's story. So I've been running seminars kind of explaining all of this stuff. And the thing is, I think about people's lives as timelines, but also as like movies. So, and I tell people, if you were to go watch the latest Avengers movie or whatever, Avengers Endgame, you go into that movie, you watch it. When you come out of it, even though it was 2-3 hours, you probably could explain to me exactly what happened, the flow of what happened, because it is a story. And the same thing with people, their lives are stories. So I'm just trying to get to know the story of who they are. And I think that's why I'm able to retell it so effectively without taking notes. And again, it's building out the timeline in my mind because I'm a very visual person. So I'll see where the flow of what they're doing in their lives. And the thing that keeps me present is just being curious about those, like genuinely curious about those pieces of people's lives. And at this point, having gone through over 4,300 conversations,
Right.
I think there's a lot to learn from people. And I think it can look like learning how to interact with a personality that you might find difficult to talk to. Maybe they're really shy and they only give you one-word answers. But that is value if you can figure out how to connect with that type of person. The next time you come across them in a business setting or like at a party or something like that, you're prepared to talk to that person. Or it might be they tell you about a service that you could really use that you didn't know about yet, or a movie that you'd really enjoy watching. So I think there's a lot of value in it too. And I think it's on me to find that value in the conversation. So I take a lot of accountability for that. And I think that makes me present as well.
I think you're going to be the next Larry King. That's what I think. I think you're going to have your own talk show. You're going to be the #1 in the whole world like he was.
Maybe.
I was just thinking, you're not even halfway done, which is amazing. And I'm sure you've learned, I mean, for sure the first 500 people, you're like, wow, this is, talk about eye-opening. But you have a whole nother 5,000 you get to play in that space. That's super cool.
Continuously eye-opening. And even the last year, like Eileen said, I used to meet every person in person. So the first 3,259 people were all in person. The last 1,000-ish have been virtual, but that has allowed me to talk to people from several different countries. So I've met people from 80 different countries now. And the perspective, it's just like, I grew a lot as a person through the project, and I've grown a lot over the last year from now being clued into what's going on in Belarus or Peru or Colombia or all these different places. And it's like, now I have friends who are Arabic. I've never had that before in my life. And yeah, just like having these meetings and not taking a sip of coffee because someone is going through fasting in Ramadan and wanting to be conscious of that. It's like things you don't even think of before. But the last year I've grown a lot because of just being forced to go talk to people virtually.
So
will
cool.
you continue virtually, or will you meet people in person again?
Both. I want to do, I think the ideal scenario would be 2 days in person, 2 days virtual to keep the international aspect. And then I would love to do 1 day of turning it into a YouTube series where I do like a fun, exciting activity with someone that maybe they're like a skydiving instructor and we go skydiving together, and it's that experience, but also me sitting down with them, capturing their backstory, what that activity means to them, and like put in X activity here with whatever person. I would love to do that every Friday and kind of get into a cadence of that and build that into a YouTube series and then potentially a show, because Drew Scott from the Property Brothers, HGTV, reached out to me last year about potentially doing a show together. And then COVID happened, but he and his wife had me on their podcast. I was able to meet them in person at their house in LA. They were part of my project. So I'm like, okay, there's still this opportunity to potentially turn this into a show in the future. And I would have to kind of prove that concept out. And that's the way I'm thinking of doing it.
Rob, listen, I read somewhere that you went up with a dude in a plane and then realized he had built the plane that you were in as you were flying with this dude in the plane. So some of these risks, man, you better really think about what's going on here before you take it all to the YouTube. But so, yeah, how was that experience? That sounds like a true adventure.
That was good. He told me as we were rolling up to the plane that he had built it himself. I didn't know because he was introduced to me through my older cousin. So
Yeah.
there was a bit of vetting, I guess. So I felt more
Right.
comfortable with that. But yeah, we got in his car. We went through the gate of the hangar, and I've never seen a plane that looked like this before because it just looked like a toy plane. It was not a normal plane shape. And yeah, he was like, "Yeah, it's amateur built, so you don't have to fly in it if you don't want." And he made it as a joke, but I took it very seriously. And
There wasn't duct tape on it anywhere, right? It wasn't like, or was it a little
no,
suspect?
it on the side it said experimental in
Oh,
big
perfect.
white letters.
Did you have to sign a waiver?
No, which yeah, because I don't know, Roy Halladay, the Phillies pitcher, he died in a plane crash, and this plane was quite small, and I was like, should I do this or should I not? And I obviously did, but
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, I've had mechanics that have almost killed me several times because they don't know my plane as well as I know my plane. So I kind of felt like he had a really good idea of his plane, but it was cool. And
That's
taking off, it was almost like a panic attack. I fought that off a couple times, and then being up there was actually really serene and almost like meditative state because once you realize you're okay, you're just flying over the ocean in what was probably more intimate than a car. It felt just like a very small car, and you felt the shift of each breeze, and you could see how the plane kind of righted itself. And then we took like a very sharp turn, and the G forces from that almost made me throw up. So
Oh,
there was a lot
perfect.
going on in that experience, but I talk about it all the time, and I think I'm very interested in those moments of life where you do something and it continues to provide you value for years to come.
That's so cool. That's so cool. What with all these people that you talk to, I'm very curious. You know, one of the questions I wrote down here that I was curious about is, what are most people's fears? In other words, I mean, you've talked to a lot of people. It's like,
Mhm.
well, what do you see that keeps coming up? Or it's almost like my question is, what are people like in general, right?
Yeah. I think hmm, fears. I think everyone has insecurities and uncertainties. I don't know if I have a specific for people's
Mm-hmm.
fears.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say that I talk to a lot of people. I always say the biggest thing I've learned is no one really knows what they're doing with their lives. Everyone's doing the best they can with the resources that they have. For me, that looks like trying to build this project and trying to figure out how I turn this into a legitimate career with income and like I'm stable. For you,
Right.
it's like how do we grow this community and keep people engaged and connecting with each other so that they get value. For other people, it's whatever their careers or going into marriage or having a kid for the first time. So I've just learned that everyone has insecurities and uncertainties. And I think high school or college version of me thought that confident people didn't have insecurities, but now I think confident people are the ones who accept their insecurities and just walk alongside them. And yeah, I say, and then a lot of people struggle with their mental health as well. I think that's just something that comes up often in the project. I just talked to someone this morning who struggled with suicidal thoughts throughout high school and wanted to become a social worker to help other people like them.
Mhm.
And things like that up very often, whether it's people feeling anxious or depressed or comparing themselves to the people around them. So I think I've learned that more people struggle with that than we see. And I think it's becoming a more prevalent topic, especially like as the younger generations just talk more openly about it. But yeah, that was something I think that surprised me. I've been fortunate to not have, as a whole, struggles with my mental health. I've had days where I felt anxious or depressed, but always was able to bounce back pretty easily. But I've found people who it's a really big part of their life. And I think that's probably more common than I anticipated before I started this project.
So basically, most of your panic attacks come in homemade aircraft.
Yeah, yeah. Driven by outside sources that could potentially kill me.
Yeah, and what was interesting is I was thinking about this conversation that kept coming up to me. I was like, I bet the people that would reach out to him are outgoing people, right? In other words,
Yeah.
and I could be completely wrong, but I'm thinking it would take an extrovert or an outgoing person to simply push DM on your Instagram and say, hey, I want to meet with you. So then I'm thinking, well, I wonder if it's all extroverts and outgoing and happy people that are reaching out to him, and if he can see that or notice that, or if it's just a mixture of all kind of people reaching out to you. Have you seen any patterns or anything like that?
I would say it probably skews extroverted,
Mhm.
but I do have a lot of people who are really introverted and a lot of people who are very socially anxious. And the cool thing is they message me saying, I'm usually socially anxious, but I'm trying to
That's
expand my comfort zone. And I feel like this is a good way for me to do that. So I like that sometimes people see my project as almost like this safe space. It's so weird because I become this perfect stranger that they can tell anything to and they don't have to worry about it afterwards. But then at the same time, I publicly post everything. I mean, granted, I'm conscious of things that stay between me and the person during that conversation and
Sure.
what is to be kept in private and what is to be posted. But yeah, I think a lot of people use it as an opportunity to expand their comfort zone as well. And I've talked to people who are painfully shy on the calls, and even I sometimes am like, well, how did they? Why are we here? Like, why did
Yeah.
they want to talk? And then I think I've also come to realize that they may not be conscious of how painfully shy they're being. That may be them doing their best to keep up with conversation. And as
Yeah.
we're talking, they have a million things going on in their mind that are clouding their ability to just hear the
Right.
question and respond and ask another one. So I try to be conscious of that too, because I want those people to have a good experience and then be more confident when they go and interact with people the next time.
So interesting.
Yeah. Rob, what do you think makes someone interesting?
I think authenticity makes people interesting. I've put out like a TikTok about that because I think people think they need to have accolades or accomplishments or have to been through some crazy story, but the conversations that I enjoy most with people are the people who know themselves and are just interested in what they're authentically interested in, which is why I think it's so important to know of yourself, the family, occupation, recreation, dreams things, because
Right.
if you know yourself, you then become a more interesting person to the people you talk about. Because if I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey, what music are you interested in? You say, I like everything but country. I can't go anywhere with that. So that's not interesting to me. But if you tell me, like, hey, I really like John Mayer and I've been to his concert 3 times and this is my favorite song of his, now I'm interested because we have content to talk about. So the most interesting people to me are the people that know themselves. And on top of that, people who've made a really big impact on me are people whose lives have been different than what I've known. And I come from a family, a middle class family. My parents are still together. They're still alive. I have 2 older siblings. They're both doing well for themselves. All 3 of us are college educated, Penn State graduates. So I have just experienced that version of life. And then I've met people who are in their 20s who've lost both their parents already and have no siblings. And to me, it's like, wow, that's crazy that at 20 years old, someone they have no more immediate family. That's something that I hope to have until I'm 60, 70. Like, I want my parents to be around for a while. So I think those stories just stick with me because there are people in the world going through things that I've never had to think about and hopefully don't have to think about I mean, when it comes to losing a family member, obviously it's going to happen for all of us at some point, but yeah, there's people who've been through experiences that I hope I never have to go through, and they've come out on the other side. And that's been really inspiring for me to be like, when I'm feeling stressed about my project, if it's feeling like it's hard to grow or it's hard to reach financial stability, I can put that into perspective with what other people have had to go through. And I think that makes it easier for me to pursue my own goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goal setter. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, I love the way you're even saying, I mean, I guess it's changed how you answer questions, because I think a lot of people would say that, oh, I love everything but country. But I think you're right, that a specific piece helps people connect.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Authenticity is something we play around with a lot because Eileen and myself and the people that come through our groups are unique people for the most part. And so, the question becomes is how can we help people and personally become more authentic? Because in my mind, my confusing, crazy mind, it's we need to find our authenticity and we need to be unique and we need to not be embarrassed to talk about our what I call our edges and our scars and this and that, because that's what I believe brings us together. Um, but at the same time, I always think if you're an asshole, change, right? Like if you're an asshole, don't be authentic. be don't be like that. Like try
Right.
to improve or whatever. So it's super interesting that you brought up authenticity because that's something that's always on my mind.
Mhm.
Because to your point, I think it does connect people more so when they're both coming from an authentic place, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. Authenticity from a maybe a positive
Yeah.
perspective of interests, or even like because it's always interesting to people who are assholes, for example, why are they that way? I'm
Yeah.
someone who believes that everyone is born good and then shaped bad from experiences or
Mhm.
whatever. And yeah, like if you can understand, hey, like I had an abusive relationship with my father when I was a kid, then you're like, "Ah, I start to understand why this person
Mhm.
acts this way. And it's
Yeah.
not right that they should act that way. But then like, yeah, but then it goes back to knowing yourself. And sometimes
Mhm.
people, I think if people know themselves and they are just confident in who they are as a person, it's easier because I don't know, sometimes people think like, oh, maybe my family dynamic is not as cool as someone else's, or maybe my education or my upbringing wasn't like, I don't want to talk about mine because it's embarrassing compared to this person. But if people can just like own who they were and what they've been through, then everything else makes sense. And it's just that it's it's confidence to me
Mhm.
of just being like, this is who I am. This is what I've been through, and this has shaped me into the things that I'm interested in now. So yeah, I think it all goes back to knowing ourselves and our stories.
Yeah, totally. It's funny you say. I think the big things I battle are the knowing yourself such that you can accept who you are and then present that to people that you meet, right? Which was what we're talking about. But then the comparison thing, I think, is a killer for a lot of us in America, for sure,
Mhm.
because that can be haunting, right? I had a group I was with today this morning, and we were talking about comparison and how much of a killer it can be. So that's interesting. You brought
Mhm.
that up.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend?
No, I had a girlfriend for 2 years after college, and
Okay.
we mutually split up. And then around that time is when I started this. So I could probably see where you're going with this question, but
She's like, I'm out.
no, we had broken up before, and she was the one of the first people that I told about this project and was super supportive of it. But
Yeah.
when I
Rob, you're going on 10,000 first dates, basically, is what's going on here, right? So my
uh,
next question, my follow-up question is, of all the girls that you talk to in this process, how many times have you felt a little crush on one of them? Is it more often than not, or is it like very, doesn't happen a lot?
I would say it doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened. There are multiple girls that I've like gone out on dates with, multiple as in like a few. Uh, After the fact are ones that I have gotten off the call with and be like, oh, like we really clicked. I could see myself talking to that person.
Oh yeah.
The last year has been a little bit difficult because virtually and whatnot, there's no way to really follow up unless you want to do another Zoom call and whatnot, which I have done with people. But um, I've kind of stayed away from dating because I was living in Philly and then I went out to LA the summer of 2017. And then I came back to Philly for 5 months and I went out to LA for 9 months in 2018. I came back to Philly for 4 months. I went to LA for 3 months in 2019. Then I went back to Philly for 2 months. Then I went to Hoboken for 9 months. So I've just kind of bounced around, and I have always been like, I don't want to get into a relationship on the East Coast and then bounce over to LA and be doing long distance and vice versa. And also, I just haven't been at a point where I have been able to take myself out financially. So I was like, I'm not, I know there are people out there that don't care about that, but like dating comes with a cost at times, whether it's time or money, and I just haven't been in a place to invest into that portion yet. So it's interesting the way that it makes me approach my life, because I'm like, okay, well, I have my project. The most important thing to me is having this as the foundation of my future, because I put so much of myself into it, and I do think it will create the most free future for me, my wife, and eventual kids. So I'm like, I have to have this locked in, and then get to that place of stability, and then I can build in the relationship piece, and I can build in the like home and the car and stuff. But yeah, that's just the way that I've approached things. That being said, if I came across a girl today that I really liked, I'd be like, okay, well, cool, we can date. I just haven't been there yet.
I would think let's see, I would say 2 out of every 10 girls you have these hour conversations with, there would be some kind of connection there. That's just my guess. I'm not a mathematician, and I'm not like, I know you studied finance and accounting, which is numbers. But I think that's super interesting. It's a great strategy for finding somebody to date, is to have a 10,000 hours with strangers.
I'm very good on first dates.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be one of your books, or your things come out, how to lock down a lover in under 10,000 hours.
Right.
No, Rob, what you're doing, would you call it networking?
No, I call what I'm doing a project, and I just call it meeting people.
But then how does it apply, or what lessons can people take from this and apply to networking?
I think the genuine curiosity piece, although I know it's hard, like when people are networking, they're usually doing so with a purpose. But I think honestly, to remember the human piece, because at the end of the day, everyone is human. And I think about that same Ford framework. From a networking perspective, you just kind of like play around with the categories and the order of them. So it probably starts with occupation of what are you doing? What do you work? Who do you work for? What are you looking for? But then it can go into those other, like, okay, what was your education? Well, what can you trace that back to? Oh, you got into this as a kid? Like, was that something your dad did or family? And then you start to go into those other areas. And I think the best networking is when people realize how human the other person is, and then they're able to form that connection. I don't think that true networking connections come from oh, I work in Excel too, or I work in PowerPoint. It's probably like, oh, you go skiing and you've been to this resort. My wife and I have been there 5 times. And that's where I think the true bonds start to come in. So I think the lessons are just having that confidence in one-on-one conversation, and the ability to flow within those categories and seamlessly get from one to the other. I think that in itself is probably an art.
So interesting.
Yeah. Now, I can't remember when we met. Do you ask a question first, or I probably just started talking?
I have no idea. Well, I think we were introduced through Justin, right? So we already had like a shared, and it was probably like, oh, how do you know Justin type thing? And so but I always like, typically, because I knew you weren't from New York,
right?
But typically I do ask people, if I'm in person, are you from here originally? Assuming that they are, because for people who've immigrated and stuff, I don't want it to come off as an insult.
Right.
But asking if they're from there originally, and now on the Zoom calls, it's, hey, where are you calling in from?
Right.
Oh, what's it like there? And like, what's COVID like there? It was a lot of the last year of conversations. But like I said, I like to start with that location, because then you can start to build out the story of who that person is.
Yeah. How has this changed you when you meet true strangers in the real world?
I have that confidence now, because I can just talk to them as if I'm talking to someone for my project. So I just have a lot of confidence in my conversational skills from all different aspects too. Like, for example, when I started consulting at Deloitte, I very much felt, okay, I'm down here on the ladder and the partners are up here, so I should be intimidated by them. I don't feel that way with people anymore, because I have peer-to-peer spoken with people of all different levels and of success, in all different ages and all different backgrounds. So now when I interact with people, I'm more confident because I know that even if I can't relate to them through my specific story, I can relate to them through the story of someone that I've met. So for example, someone whose parents immigrated from another country. I don't know what that's like because my parents are from the Philly area, but I've heard people be like, yeah, when I was a kid, I had to do all the calls for the bills and whatnot because my parents didn't know English as well as I did because I just picked it up from the class and whatnot. And I've heard that from multiple different people. So now when I talk to someone whose parents immigrated from another country, I have that kind of shared experience to chat with them about, even though it's not mine. I'm just drawing on someone else's.
Right.
Or people who grew up in military families. Like I now understand that they moved a lot as a kid and that they had to get better at making friends and doing so quickly in new places. I've lived in the same house my whole life, aside from when I lived in Philly, in LA, and Hoboken. Like this is my childhood bedroom. This is where I was brought home when I was a baby. So I don't have that experience, but now I know the names of some of the bases that people live at, or like the countries that they typically go to, or what that kind of impact has on them. So yeah, I now when I go into any conversation, I just feel more confident because one, I know it's peer to peer. I'm not at a different level than them, and two, I just know that I'll be able to find some type of connection with them.
The guru. He's a guru, Eileen. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
The man is a guru.
What have you learned about yourself?
I have learned from meeting other people that I have a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it comes from stories like of people who have been through things that I haven't. So I've learned that I still have two parents and that they're not always going to be here, and that the only thing I can do is actively appreciate the time that I have with them. Same goes for my siblings and the friends that I have around me. So yeah, I've learned they can be taken away. And then I've met people, uh, like a guy who dove into a swimming pool, hit his neck on the bottom of the pool, paralyzed from the neck down. And it's like, or a girl who was in a car accident and was paralyzed from the chest down. So I've learned that to walk is something that I should be really thankful for.
Mhm.
And also from them, like she told me that sidewalks have a slight slant to them because for rain runoff. So when you're walking, you don't really notice it, but when you're wheeling a wheelchair, you notice that one arm has to work harder than the other. So small things like that, I'm learning about to see the world through other people's perspectives. Um, and yeah, a lot of that. I learned that I was in a good position to go to college and only have to think about college, because I've met people who had to drop out to get a job to help their parents pay rent on their apartment. And I wouldn't have thought that that was something that other people had to do, because I grew up in a situation where my parents had their lives under control by the time they had us. And you realize that's not the case for everyone. And then on just a personal basis of going through 5 years full time doing your own project, I've learned that I'm very consistent, I'm very disciplined, and I'm very persistent. And I've figured out how to weather the highs and lows of going through something like this. Like I feel like I have a lot of mental strength because I think other people could go through the same exact path for me, have everything else work out, and feel like the world is crumbling at times and want to quit, or be really excited. And I've kind of figured out how to stay grounded. And for me, it's just staying grounded in meeting the people, the action of meeting new people, because whether the Kelly Clarkson show is doing a piece on me, or whether I had a really cool partnership that slipped away and never happened, if I'm continuing to meet 3, 4 people a day, the project is going to get to where it needs to go. And I've always kind of believed in the concept of it, that the me who has met 10,000 people will not have to worry about what he's doing or what career he's in. It's just the in-between time that gives you the grief sometimes.
Yeah. Have you wanted to quit?
I've never wanted to quit, but I have been doubtful that it would get to a point where I would be able to survive solely off of the project. And I still go through that all the time. Like when I was younger, it was easier because when you're 25, it's like most of my friends, going back to comparison, are also just going into their careers and stuff, and they're in long-term relationships, but they're not doing anything like crazy yet. And then around 27, everyone starts to get married, and then around 29, everyone buys their first house, and now everyone's starting to have kids, and you're like, oh, I see how my life is now much different, and I can't in fact even get to the places that they're at because of the choices that I've made. And I would choose this path every time, but I think now I feel a little bit more pressure, not that it affects me in any way, but it's something I think about and can contribute to that doubt. But at the same time, still very confident. So I'm like, I'll just always push forward until things work out. And to me, it's not a if it can work out, it's just a when and a how, and then it's just tweaking the formula.
Hey, welcome to our world. We're on the same path as you. Not married, no families. We're about 2 years older than you, maybe 3. So it's a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air to hear you say that what you've learned from a lot of other people and your journey is, none of us really have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Even the CEO, and I've owned businesses and this and that, and I tell people all the time, as the owner of the business, the CEO, whatever, none of us have it all figured out. And we're all just like, what do we do next? What do we do next? Which is challenging. So that's an interesting thing.
So yeah. Trey and I talk a lot about language and words, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you come up with the plan, or through it, the word Sonder, wasn't that something that created that? And if so,
Sonder is just my favorite word. It's something that existed before I started the project. Was something I thought about a lot. I don't know if you look it up in the dictionary, I don't know if it's an actual word, but it's from this dictionary of obscure sorrows, which I'm pretty sure is just a coffee table book that has these words that all have like these really deep meanings. But Sonder is something that I think about a lot, and it's a theme of life I think that I enjoy. Which I'll let you talk about it, but an F.
What is it? What does it mean?
So it's defined as the realization that everyone around you is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. Ooh. And they all have like their own aspirations, their own worries. And it's something like they may show up in your life as just a passerby in a car at night, or they may be like a main character of your life. So it's really hard to actually wrap your head around the fact that even there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us on this Zoom call, but at the end of this Zoom call, we all go back into our own lives, and we all are still thinking about that thing that I have to do next week, or like that thing that is bothering me that I have to talk to that person about. Like, we can come together for this call, but it's even hard to imagine that we all have realities that complex. But the thing is, everyone in the world does.
Yeah, I think coming from that understanding helps us be more empathetic and compassionate towards other people, especially in conversations, right?
Yes.
It's like in the 4 agreements, which we're studying in one of our groups right now. It's, don't take anything personally. And, talking about before, when people are assholes, they're not trying to be assholes to us. There's just something going on, like you mentioned, in them that we don't know, that's probably so complex and difficult, and coming with that understanding, I think creates more connection. Mm-hmm. Super interesting. Let's do the speed round. 4 questions. The first thing that comes to your mind, fast speed round.
Okay.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Favorite kind of donut?
Chocolate icing on on the regular.
Yes, yeah. I'm a chocolate icing too. If you had to get another degree, what would you get? Gun to your head.
I always said I would, if I went back to Penn State, like architecture would be cool.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, but actually it's something I wanted at Penn State, but they didn't offer, was music business. Music is a really big passion of mine. So.
Oh, right. Which leads me to my next question. One of your favorite musical artists?
John Bellion.
John Bellion.
Mm-hmm.
Who's that?
It's very pop centric. He had a song called All Time Low that was popular a few years ago, but he is known, there was a song called Trumpets by Jason Derulo back in like 2013.
Oh, yeah.
Very upbeat.
Yeah.
John Bellion produced that song. So you know how like poppy that song is? That's kind of how his music is. But he just did the song Holy by Justin Bieber and Chance the Rapper. He wrote that song. So I like him because I can say his name and people don't know him. But also I think he is one of the best artists out there.
Badass. Last time you cried?
Last time I cried, I think in LA like a month ago. It was I was with one of my friends, one of the guys that the guy that hosted me for a year and a half, and I was just talking to him about how thankful I was that he took me in. Like, there were times that I had got to bring him to a concert and it wasn't that cool, but he made it seem like a really big deal, which made me feel good about the value I was bringing to the table of staying with him as a roommate. So yeah, just thanking him for that.
Very cool. Very cool. You seem like you have learned and you've implemented, and perhaps it was always in your DNA, a true sense of gratitude in your life. And I guess my last question is, do you have any kind of daily practice or prayer, or like I journal in the morning? I'd have a whole thing in the morning. I was curious if you have any kind of daily practice that you like to do.
I have it right here, which is the 5-minute journal. I sometimes use it as a crutch. Like you can see that I've not gotten too far through it. But like
you're a busy dude. You're a busy dude. We understand.
But like April 2020, it was really important to me because when I felt like I didn't have control over things, I could write out my feelings. So I used it during that time. I would say my daily practice, as cliche as it is talking to other people, because that is the thing that has derived most of my gratitude. And it's the thing that I learned the most through. So for me, it's just getting out and learning about myself through learning about other people.
Amen. Amen. It's so true, though. I think it's such an amazing conversation. Because in here, I'll get off this in a second, but it's we go inside a lot, right? We go inside and we think and we just stew on things or whatever. And the only thing that'll bring us out is with being with somebody else or talking to somebody else, which is, that you just, reminded me of that, which is so powerful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
I have one final question.
Yeah.
Who is on your wish list to meet?
Trey Humphreys, and he's doing it today. Score.
Well, Trey was on there for a while.
Yeah.
But John Bellion is someone who I want to meet because I just think he's a musical genius, but also I put musicians on a pedestal. Like I don't think that I care as much about athletes or as much about politicians, but because I like music and I think it has a cool impact, those are the types of people that most interest me. And also Drake, I think is really, I would love to sit down with him because I feel like however you feel about him, for someone to be as relevant on the top of the music charts for as long as he has done, it's like, it's not just luck and it's not just natural. There has to be so much strategy and talent behind that and dedication. And that really interests me. So I would love to sit down with him as well.
We'll make it happen. We'll make a few calls.
Yeah,
he'll be stopping by your place tomorrow.
Okay.
Do you reach out to people at all anymore and try to solicit, or just?
No, not really, because I have a lot of messages to go through. So I feel bad if people have taken the time to message me, I feel like I should meet with them and not forego that to look for someone better, because it's like you never know what someone's story is or what they'll lead you to.
Yeah.
But if I see, like, I came across these two artists on TikTok recently, and they put out a song that I really enjoyed. So I shot them a message that was like, hey, good stuff with your song. I really enjoyed it. I won't like invite them, but then if they're like, hey, cool project, I'd love to be part of it, then I would have them be part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just goes back to like, I don't want people seeing people on my page, me being like, I reached out to this person and they're like, hey, what the heck? I reached out to you in October. Why haven't you come back to me? Like, am I not as cool as this person? So yeah, I try to meet with people who reach out to me.
Makes sense.
Trey, did you have questions about TikTok?
I know why you're cutting the hours down, because you're addicted to TikTok just like I'm addicted to TikTok, and all I do is scroll through TikTok. It's just the most addictive thing ever. No, this has been super amazing, and I'm pumped up. I got pages of notes here that I'm going to go through, and I really enjoyed it. But you're not allowed to take notes. I'm allowed to take notes. He's not allowed to take notes. But I really appreciate you jumping on here, and Eileen for setting this up and you guys connecting. This has been amazing for me. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for having me. Always nice to share the story with people, and hopefully you got some value out of it or made you think about things differently. And it's good practice for me because, like I said, I want to do more of this in the future. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Totally.
Yeah.
Eileen, final quote or final words?
No, we'll send out your information to have people connect with you, and
cool.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thank
All right,
you,
brother.
again.
Good luck with the next 5,000. Can't wait to see what becomes of all of this.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care and get rid of that coronavirus cough. That's
I will.
you
Yeah.
can't have that. See ya.
Thanks,
See
Rob.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.